It was a beautiful spring morning in New York City, and inside one of the city's grandest auditoriums, a remarkable event was about to take place. The Youth Leadership Conference had gathered some of the brightest young minds from across America. These were the future doctors, lawyers, engineers, and perhaps even future presidents, all gathered to debate the most pressing issues facing our country. Among the crowd sat Barron Trump, just 19 years old. Tall, quiet, and well-dressed in a simple dark suit, Barron seemed almost out of place among the boisterous and excited students. He wasn't there to make speeches. In fact, most people didn't even notice him as he sat silently in the third row, listening intently to every word spoken on stage. But that would soon change. All eyes were focused on the young woman about to take the stage. Sophia Williams, a fiery 21-year-old activist known for her sharp words and bold opinions. Her bright red hair and fierce expression made her hard to ignore. As she stepped confidently to the podium, you could feel the energy shift in the room. Sophia was ready to challenge everything she believed was wrong with America, especially the influence of older generations. What no one knew, not even Sophia herself, was that before this day was over, Barron Trump would rise to offer one of the most powerful and unexpected responses anyone had ever heard. A debate about age, wisdom, and the future of America was about to begin. But this would become much more than a debate. It would become a lesson in respect, humility, and understanding. As Sophia Williams adjusted the microphone, a smirk played on her lips. The crowd of young students leaned forward in anticipation, ready for another one of her bold and unapologetic speeches. She began with a sharp, clear voice that echoed across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her eyes scanning the audience, "we are here to talk about the future. But how can we build that future when it's still being controlled by people who won't live long enough to see it?" A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room. Some students glanced at each other, unsure if she was serious, but Sophia doubled down, her tone growing more passionate, even defiant. "Look around," she continued, her hand gesturing wildly. "We, the youth, are fighting to fix problems we didn't create. Climate change, a broken economy, a divided nation, and yet decisions that shape our lives are still being made by people over 50. People clinging to outdated beliefs about family, faith, and patriotism." She paused, letting her words hang in the air, then added sharply, "They talk about the good old days. But what about our days? What about our future? Why should someone who may not even be here in 20 years get to decide what America looks like for us?" Cheers and applause broke out from parts of the audience. Sophia, emboldened, pressed on. "I say it's time for an age limit in politics. If you're over 50, you've had your chance. Step aside, let those of us who will live to see the consequences take charge. And let's be honest, those so-called traditional values are just excuses to hold on to power and keep things the same." As her final words echoed, many students stood, clapping and shouting. But in that third row, Barron Trump sat still, listening quietly, a thoughtful expression on his face. Little did Sophia know, her fiercest challenge was yet to come. For a long moment after Sophia's fiery speech, the room was filled with applause and loud cheers. Students stood on their feet, shouting words of support, energized by her boldness. But in the midst of the noise, one young man remained seated. His hands rested calmly in his lap, his eyes focused, thoughtful. It was Barron Trump. Then, as the applause began to fade, Barron slowly rose from his chair. At first, only a few people noticed, but when he began walking toward the podium, a hush swept over the room. Heads turned, whispers filled the air. "Is that Barron Trump?" someone murmured. Sophia leaned against the podium, smirking as she watched him approach. "Well, well," she said into the microphone, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Looks like we've got royalty in the house. Ready to defend your father's America, Barron." Some students chuckled, others looked uncomfortable. But Barron didn't flinch. He walked with quiet confidence, adjusting his jacket as he reached the stage. His tall frame stood straight, but his expression was calm, almost gentle. He stepped up to the microphone, took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was steady, deep, and clear, filled with a quiet strength that made the room fall silent. Thank you, Sophia, he began, nodding politely. You've spoken with a lot of passion today, and I respect that. But passion without wisdom can lead us to dangerous places. You could hear a pin drop. Even Sophia raised her eyebrows, caught off guard by Barron's calm and respectful tone. He continued, his gaze moving across the room. You say that people over 50 have nothing left to offer, that they should sit down and be quiet. But have you ever thought about who built the world we're standing in? The freedoms we enjoy, the technology we hold in our hands? Barron paused, letting the weight of his words settle. We are here, all of us, because of the sacrifices, hard work, and wisdom of those who came before. And before you talk about silencing them, maybe, just maybe, we should start by listening. The room was completely still now, every eye fixed on Barron. The battle of ideas had truly begun. Barron stood tall at the podium, his eyes calm but filled with a quiet fire. After a long pause, he leaned in slightly toward the microphone. Sophia, he said gently, I hear your frustration. I know many people feel like their voices are ignored. But let me tell you something. The people over 50, the ones you want to silence, are the same people who built the very foundation we're standing on. The room was silent. Every word seemed to hang in the air, pressing on the ears of every listener. You talk about technology, Barron continued, about iPhones and social media and everything this generation uses to raise their voices. But do you know who invented the technology that runs those devices? It wasn't 20-year-olds. It was men and women over 50. The same people you say should step aside. He paused again, scanning the room, making sure his words landed. The doctors working on cures for cancer, many of them are over 60. The veterans who fought to defend this country and give us the freedom to stand here and speak our minds, over 70. The teachers who spend their lives shaping young minds, and the parents and grandparents who sacrificed everything for their children, over 50. A few students in the audience began to shift uncomfortably. Some nodded, realizing the truth in his words. And let me tell you something else, Barron said, his voice growing stronger. My grandfather came to this country as a poor immigrant. He worked day and night, built a business from nothing. Was he perfect? No. But he believed in this country, and he passed that belief to my father and to me. And I'll be honest, I've learned more about strength, sacrifice, and love from people over 50 than I have from anyone my age. He looked straight at Sophia now, not with anger, but with a kind of compassion. Before we throw away the wisdom of an entire generation, maybe we should think about who we're really turning our backs on, the very people who carried us here. The room stayed silent. Barron had given them something to think about, something deeper than applause. Sophia's eyes narrowed as Barron's words settled over the room. For a moment, she said nothing, but her fingers gripped the edge of the podium tightly. Then, with a sharp breath, she leaned toward the microphone and fired back. Easy for you to say, Barron, she snapped, her voice laced with sarcasm. You grew up in a golden tower. You've never known what it's like to struggle, to be ignored, to wonder if you'll be able to pay rent next month. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some students nodded, emboldened by her defiance. But Barron didn't flinch. He stood quietly, hands resting calmly in front of him. After a pause, he leaned into the mic again, speaking softly but firmly. And now, a deep emotion was rising in his voice. Sophia, he said, you don't know me. You don't know the nights I've sat alone, reading words about my family that would break most people. You don't know what it's like to watch people you love be torn apart in the media. You don't know what it's like to lose people you care about and not be able to do anything about it. His voice wavered just slightly, but he kept going, stronger now. And yes, I've been blessed in ways many haven't. But blessings don't protect you from pain. They don't protect you from loneliness or fear or grief. You think I haven't struggled? You think I haven't asked myself what my purpose is? Sophia looked at him, a flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe doubt in her eyes. Barron took a deep breath and continued, his gaze steady. But here's what I've learned. From my parents, from my grandparents, from veterans I volunteered with at shelters. Pain doesn't give you the right to dismiss others. Struggle doesn't give you the right to silence a generation that fought for everything we have. The men and women you call dinosaurs built the roads we drive on. the hospitals we're born in, and the freedoms we take for granted. He turned slightly, addressing the whole room now. So, I ask you, is a country stronger when we cut out the people who've carried us through the darkest times? Or when we stand together, young and old, and learn from each other? The room was quiet. Even Sophia seemed unsure now, her confident mask beginning to slip. The tension in the room was thick as Barron's final words echoed through the air. Sophia stood at the podium, her arms crossed, but her eyes betrayed her. The sharp, defiant spark had dimmed, replaced with something more vulnerable. Maybe doubt, maybe reflection. Still, she wasn't ready to give in. Leaning slightly into the microphone, she shot back, though her voice had lost some of its earlier sharpness. Barron, you talk about building bridges, but what about the bridges that were never built for us? What about the people who've been left behind while the older generations held on to power? You say we should be thankful, but thankful for what? A planet on fire? An economy where young people can't afford homes? A country where justice feels like a dream? Some in the audience clapped softly as if unsure. Others stayed silent, weighing her words against the quiet strength of Barron's argument. Barron listened without interrupting. He gave her space to speak, and when she finished, he nodded thoughtfully before stepping forward again. Sophia, you're right about one thing, he said, his voice softer now, carrying a mix of sadness and understanding. There are real problems. The world is not perfect, and yes, some mistakes were made by older generations. But you know what? Every generation makes mistakes. Every generation also sacrifices. And those same people you criticize, many of them fought for freedoms, for justice, for a better life for us. They worked hard, believed in this country, and hoped to leave something better behind. He paused and looked directly at Sophia, his gaze kind but firm. You say you fight for inclusion, but how can you preach inclusion while excluding millions of Americans just because of their age? How can you talk about justice if your solution is to take away someone's voice? His words hung heavy in the air. The truth is, we don't have to agree on everything. But if we can't even respect each other, if we can't listen, then what kind of future are we building? For the first time, Sophia said nothing. The room, once filled with noise, had grown still, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The silence in the auditorium was almost deafening. Sophia stood there, gripping the edges of the podium as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. The fire in her eyes, so fierce when she first took the stage, had faded. Now all that remained was the weight of Barron's words. Words that had touched a part of her she didn't expect anyone to reach. For a long moment she didn't speak. The audience waited, some holding their breath, others exchanging quiet glances, sensing something was shifting inside her. Finally, Sophia stepped back from the microphone, took a deep breath, and then, with a trembling voice that was nothing like the sharp confidence she had shown before, she spoke. I don't know what to say, she began, her voice soft, almost breaking. When I walked up here today, I thought I had all the answers. I thought if I spoke loud enough, if I was angry enough, people would understand how much pain my generation feels. She paused, swallowing hard, her eyes glancing toward Barron for a brief moment before she looked down. But listening to you, Barron, I realize I haven't been fair. I've been so focused on blaming the people who came before me that I never stopped to think about what they went through, about what they sacrificed, about what they built so that people like me could even stand here and speak freely. The room was so quiet you could hear her take a shaky breath. I owe you and everyone here an apology, she said, her voice gaining a little more strength. I was wrong to say older generations should be silenced. I was wrong to dismiss their voices, their stories, their sacrifices. She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. Maybe if I had listened before I judged, I would have realized that we need each other, young and old. Because if we're going to fix anything in this country, it's going to take all of us. As she stepped back from the podium, a soft wave of applause began, slow but growing stronger, filled with respect for her courage to admit she was wrong. After the debate ended, the auditorium slowly emptied. Students gathered in small groups, whispering about what had just happened. Some were still processing Barron's words, while others quietly admired Sophia's bravery in admitting she had been wrong. Near the stage, Barron quietly gathered his notes, ready to leave unnoticed as he had arrived. But before he could step away, a soft voice called out behind him. "Barron, wait." He turned to see Sophia standing a few feet away, her arms folded across her chest, not out of defiance now, but as if trying to hold herself together. Gone was the fiery activist from earlier. Now, she looked like a young woman trying to find the right words. Barron offered a gentle smile. "Hi, Sophia," he said kindly, as if there had been no clash between them at all. Sophia hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I said, for the way I said it. You didn't deserve that." Barron nodded thoughtfully, his smile never fading. "Thank you, that means a lot." She looked down for a moment before glancing up again, her voice softer now. "You know," she said quietly, "I came here thinking I had to fight everyone older than me to be heard. But you're right, if I really believe in inclusion, that means including everyone, not just people who agree with me." Barron's eyes softened and he said, "It's easy to think we know it all when we're young, but that's why we need people who've been there, who've made mistakes, and learn from them." Sophia smiled weakly, but there was a flicker of real understanding in her eyes now. "Thank you, Barron," she whispered. He smiled, offering a small nod. "We're all still learning, Sophia, and that's okay." In that quiet moment, two young people, once on opposite sides, shared something real, a moment of humility and hope. As the last of the students left the auditorium, a quiet sense of reflection hung in the air. What had started as a fiery debate had turned into something far more profound, a reminder of the power of respect, humility, and listening. Barron Trump remained for a moment longer, glancing around the room that had witnessed such a rare and beautiful exchange, one that few expected but many needed to hear. Friends, as we think about what happened between Barron and Sophia, there's an important life lesson here, one that especially speaks to all of us who have lived long enough to see generations rise and fall. We live in a time when it's easy for people to dismiss one another, to believe that because someone is older, their voice no longer matters. But the truth is, age brings wisdom, perspective, and lessons earned through hard years and harder choices. For those of you watching, the veterans who fought for freedom, the parents and grandparents who worked hard to give your children a better life, the men and women who sacrificed so much for this country, you deserve to be heard. Your stories, your struggles, your values matter now more than ever. And to the younger generation full of passion and energy, we need that. But passion without wisdom can become dangerous. We need each other. Young people need the guidance of those who've walked through storms before. And older generations need to see hope carried forward by the youth. So here's the lesson we should all take to heart. Progress is not about tearing down what came before, it's about building something better, together. If this story touched you, if you believe America is strongest when we honor all generations, please give this video a like. Let me know in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how powerful do you think Barron's response was? Did Sophia's apology surprise you? And if you want to hear more inspiring stories that remind us what truly makes America great, faith, family, sacrifice, and respect, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Thank you for watching, and as always, God bless you and God bless America.